Good evening. My name is Shay Weiner. I am a product manager at Wix, specifically in Wix Code. Today I'm going to talk about API, about adding an API to a product. So usually, like a boring presentation, we'll start with graphs, with information. Everybody knows. There are tons of APIs, and there are tons of APIs calls, and it's growing. So if you are not convinced that APIs are important, I can use name dropping, okay, of the major players and how API plays a role in their business. So at this point, it's fair to say that if your managers come to you tomorrow and say, let's add an API to our product, you'll say, sure, it sounds like a good idea and we need to evaluate it. So today's presentation, it's not about APIs. It's about engineers. It's about your role in this process of adding an API to a product, okay? So in many companies, the first time usually an engineer sees the product is when the product manager comes to him and say, hey, here is a full spec, please develop it. In companies that works better, the developer actually see it while the product spec is being made. I think with APIs, the developers should actually be involved from the beginning. And why? Because most companies are managed by people with business orientation. Smart people. They can value how API help other companies. They will give you the resources. But the problem is they don't have the knowledge to build it. And this is a totally different thing. It's not the regular feature. It's a completely new product. So my goal today is first that you understand the importance of your role, engineers, in this process. And second, I want to give you guidelines, tips for how you can help your company on this process. So a little bit about myself. I made the regular engineering journey in Israel, studied software engineering at Ben Gurion, became a full-stack developer, then a team leader. Then at some point, we came to redo the Wix e-commerce solution. Found myself managing 20 people, focus all my day on architecture and teaching people how to do, engineers how to do TDD, and tons of code reviews. I know for some reason most of you like it, but for me, that was hell. Fortunately, I was able to switch. I was more interested in discussing the product roadmap at the next room. Fortunately, I was able to switch and became a product manager here at Wix. After some time, I joined the Wix Code, joined Yoav when we started Wix Code. And I think this is a product that lets me bring my past experience, because this is a product that has a major part aiming for developers, and let me bring my past experience into developing it. So a little bit about Wix Code. So our users, okay, they always ask us to give them tools to create unique experiences on their sites. In other cases, they ask us to give them tools to create their own business logic. So to provide a promotion to their visitors at the right time based on specific conditions. So these are things that they ask from us. So what we did in Wix is we started to build the common use cases. We built an e-commerce solution. We built a restaurant solution, a booking solution, email marketing, okay? But our users kept asking us. They want solutions for relators, for doctors, for college professors. And within each of those products, they ask for additional features, long-tail features that are custom, that are usually required, but only few sites. So one of the options we could go is, continue with trying to keep up with the feature request. We probably end up with like a configuration hell, something like a sound system. But we choose the approach of having Wix Code, letting them build whatever they want. So what we gave our user with Wix Code, we gave them APIs to the elements that actually appears on their site. They are able to change their element, they react to events, the same as you know from regular front-end development. We added a site database. We let them write code to integrate with third-party services. We let them integrate by API with Wix solutions such as the e-commerce. We give them backend node server. You have already mentioned it. We let them introduce an API to their site. So if they have, I don't know, a legacy system that wants to communicate with it, or a mobile application, they can now have an API from their site. We let them report events to Google, Facebook Pixel, or Google Tag Manager, which can help them in their own specific business logic. So this is not about, I said, this presentation about Wix Code. If you want to learn more about Wix Code and what we did and try it, you can find all the information here. And now, after we establish, the importance of APIs and that it is going to happen, so let's talk about the first step. So your manager comes to you and said, okay, we want to add API to our product. The first thing we need to do is evaluate whether there is like a real justification for that, whether the company can actually make a profit from this thing. So let's start with Wix. So we try to understand who can make money from using our APIs. Our first candidates are our Wix experts. These are users of Wix that actually build websites for others. So people who want really professional websites, they talk to our Wix experts. They are not Wix employees, okay? These guys, with our new APIs, can offer their customers unique sites. They can accept more projects, more users. So at the end, it means, though their customers become our premium users. So they earn more money because they can accept more work. And Wix makes more money because we then get more premium users. So this is how Wix, this is like the justification for us. How many of you use Slack? Okay, so Slack have an API. It allows third parties, to pull data. So Slack was founded at 2009, and the API, I think they released in 2015. So who can make money from using Slack API? We use, at Wix, we use integrations with Sentry, with New Relic. Other companies use Jira integration or GitHub integration. So if it takes New Relic, which is, I guess most of you know, but if you don't, it's a monitoring tool usually for backend servers. We use it so whenever there is an alert, it pushes the information into our Slack channels. So for New Relic users, okay, for the New Relic, the company, it lets their user consume the data not only on New Relic, on the web app that New Relic provides, but also in other places. So it lets their user get the valuable information in a place that it's convenient for their users on Slack. So it means that their user, okay, get more value from New Relic, so they are more likely to stay and use New Relic. Okay? So this is how New Relic can get more money just with using the API of Slack. Now Slack, okay, for their users, now their users get more value as well, okay, because they can get information from different places, consume everything within Slack. So Slack's become their main point of consuming data. So they are more likely to stay with Slack and at the end, okay, purchase the premium version of Slack. So this is how people make money from Slack. So, going back to those names, you could think of Salesforce, of companies that has legacy system, but they can invest money in using Salesforce API because at the end they get better business processes from themselves, integrating all the legacy system, and at the end this should increase their business, and then these companies will earn more money. You have eBay, people use eBay affiliate links in their sites, so they earn money from the affiliate links, and eBay gets more traffic. So at the end, when you come to help your company evaluate whether to invest in an API, the main question is not first what your own company can benefit, is how someone can actually make money from using the API. Okay? There are two aspects. First is how much using this API is valuable to someone. So how much money he can value from the actual, having additional information. Okay? And the second thing is how much effort needs to use the API. So if the API provides you very important data about, about your business, but in order to consume it, you need to invest a lot of development and computing power, which costs money. So maybe in this case, the data and API is valuable, but consuming it will cost a lot, and it means that the story doesn't work, okay? No one will actually be able to earn money. But if you find someone who can actually earn money from using the API, then you can ask yourself, if he earns money, now how can my company earn from that? And this is the questions you need to help your managers understand. Okay, so you agreed with your managers that you're going to add an API to your product. So the next thing your company needs to understand that their existing users are not relevant for this kind of product. Because now your company has a new user persona. It's a developer. And it's totally different from the existing user, and it doesn't matter what industry you are. And you are the one who actually know developers. You are developers, you are developers. Okay? And you know what developers need. There is a huge difference between discussions about existing experience, okay, and UX and such, to developer experience. Totally different thing. Let's go over on some points. So first about documentation. So in whatever industry, usually users, they need videos, tutorials, articles. If usually at some cases with B2B, you have actually an engineer, application engineer on the site helping the user, installing and making the software works. But with developers, you need different things. You need API reference, and you need code examples. In Wix Code, we set up an API reference site. We use, I think, Swagger at the beginning. There are tools for that. You don't need to build one. But it's JavaScript, so we added the documentation, and we created an API reference for our users. Next, about user experience. So for the existing users, usually the discussion about UX is about consistent patterns, so users will feel familiar, about using the brand colors, okay? About onboarding, how users start using your product. With developers, it's something else. It's the developer experience. It's providing a getting started tutorial. It's providing you SDKs for different languages, for JavaScript, for PHP maybe, for Java. It depends on your thing you do. I think today, giving users test console so they can just test the API even without creating an account, it's sometimes very important. And today, when we all understand how tests are important, sometimes providing test kits for could also let user, let's say, evaluate more your product, because they know that the development will be better if they can actually create tests for the use of the API. So in Wix, we invest a lot in developer experience. So first we choose Wix Code, which is the best online IDE, and we embedded it, you see, in our product. We invest a lot in our code completion engine. So users will get the right code completion at the right time. So this is something we invest because we understand that if developers won't feel that the environment is efficient for them, they won't feel that it is cool to develop in it, they will lose. We will lose them. They will switch to maybe to another solution. They will tell, a customer will tell them, oh, please, I heard Wix is great, and they tell, oh no, let's choose another one of our competitors because the development there is easier for them, is nicer for them. So we invest a lot in that. Support. So again, existing users in Wix, we have call center. People can actually call our call center in the States. We have a ticketing system. People open us tickets and then we answer them, sometimes in a few hours, sometimes after a day. With developers, it's different. Developers usually works in forums, okay? They post a question and someone from a community, not necessarily from the actual company, provides them an answer. And this is what they are used to, and this is what they will look for when they come to use an API and a product that is an API. We use actually our in-house solution that we provide our users, the Wix forum app. So we created the forum. We set up a dedicated support team. It consists of computer science undergraduates and people who actually can code. It's different from our regular support teams. Additionally, all of our Wix Code group participate on a daily basis in providing answers to our users. So I think it's also important for engineers to be involved from the day one and expect to actually communicate with the users and giving them the answers and code examples and helping them, especially at the beginning until it gets velocity, and then you usually recruit a team. Marketing. So many consumer companies like us, working a lot with paid ads, okay? In B2B, usually companies market by going to specific industry conferences, set up a booth and, presenting the latest features they have. With developers, it's different, okay? You need to arrange meetups. You need to create hackathons maybe to bring users to try and test your application, okay? You need to go where developers exist. They would like to find answers on Stack Overflow and maybe some interesting discussions by opinion leaders, okay? And this is something that your company needs to understand. It's totally different effort and skills needed from the regular effort they do. So the key here for you as engineers, you need to educate your organization, okay? Educate your organization, and in many cases you need to take a lead on developer experience because you know many products you use, developer products you use, and you know what it takes to build a good developer product. And this is a developer product. It's not just another feature on the product itself. So you understand the user and you have the justification, and now you are going to decide on the coming roadmap or even the coming sprint. So usually a discussion between a product manager like me, developers like you, start with the product manager, say, dear developer, here are 5 features solving a user problem. Please provide an effort estimation. So then the discussion continues. Usually it ends up with no one happy, and there are a list of features in and more out. And everybody knows that we'll probably not even make all features that are in. When you have an API, then you understand that maybe for some of the features you can develop only the API. So you don't develop a full-blown UI solution for all users, but you just provide an API. So it means that someone, a developer, can come and code using this API to get some value, to build his own UI and actually utilize the data or the application you provided. It means that you could provide more, maybe not to all users, but you provide more at the end to your users. When you start doing that, you realize that the best way for you is to start with the API and use the API first approach. So with the API first approach, you could give real value to your users much faster. No UI, and you know how much time product front-end development takes. It's the pixel perfect, is a lot of QA, supporting all browsers or whatever. It takes time. And with API, it's much faster, and you can really give real benefit and quickly to your users. And what happens at the end, that the product managers are sure that there are some features that no way customers will be able to live without, but since we provided, let's say, this feature 1 only the API, it actually turns out that most of the users are good with the APIs, they manage to build their own solution, and we don't really need to develop the full-blown solution. I'll give you an example, very new from our experience here. So this is the sign-up UI our users have when they enable the members application on their site. So this is what their visitors see. This is a sign-up UI. You see no special colors, no branding at all. You cannot change anything. Okay? This is what our users are asking for us. Okay? They want their own custom UI for sign-up. Logo, custom messaging, custom color based on their brand. This is what they want. So we, using the API approach, we started with providing an API to register new users. Okay? We still don't give users the custom registration API, customization and add your own logo, add your own text. We don't give it. We just started with the API. So we have users who are able to build it. They are able to build their own custom registration UI. We even have one of our users from the community, so he created this solution and he published a YouTube video explaining step by step how to use the API and create one. Okay? And now, I'm not sure how it will evolve, but if, at least in our business, if you are users that understand that you need a custom sign-up, okay, then probably either you can code because you are a developer, or you probably have a professional site. So you probably ask someone to build it for you. And this someone can get, either he can code or he can get someone to help him with this specific task. So maybe we will not even need to develop the full-blown sign-up form UI. Maybe just by having the register API, a simple call, register a username, a password, and that's it. Maybe that alone will be enough for our users, and we will be able to focus on different things. So you need to educate also your companies. When you choose API first, it forces the whole company, especially product managers, to focus on the most critical functionality. Okay? What is the most important to their user? Then can have things quickly out. Okay. So you agreed on a roadmap, and now the API goes out. Okay? So let's talk a little bit about what you need to be ready for. And we'll use, again, an example. So this is Ariel. She has limited resources, as you can see. As long as she controls, okay, the access, right? She doesn't need to scale. Okay? She can continue with doing whatever she did before. When she introduces an API, okay, two things happen. First, she loses control of what her little sister does. Okay? And second, she cannot really anticipate how much resource she actually needs. Because when your users start using your API, maybe they'll use a specific API calls that do some calculation, and it will require you to scale. So you need to prepare to scale. Maybe you need more servers just to serve these APIs, to have more calculation, maybe a replication of database. It requires more, it's something you need to prepare because it will come fast. So you need to understand that you are going to lose control a little bit of how your system works. It might make you change a little bit the architecture, and you'll need to scale and maybe even scale more. Okay? So this is something you need to be ready to do. So API is out and you have users, and the next thing your organization needs to do is how to measure success. Okay? And how to measure success of the API. So how you usually measure success within a regular application, you define a funnel. User click first screen, then moves to the second screen, to the third one. At the end somewhere he buy a premium or decide to pay you. Okay? This is how you measure it. You know how many users navigated to the first UI, and then how many of them at the end purchased a premium page. And you can easily measure it. With using an API, it's a bit different, and you need to come up with ideas how to actually measure the success of this API. You need to understand whether to invest more in API or maybe not. So the first thing you need to understand, and I'm now going back to an example I showed before. In this example, I showed you about users. They wanted a custom logic, their own logic inside on their site. This is an example for something user built, okay? That before we provided the API, he couldn't build it with Wix. So the key here to understand that I want to count how many users build something on my solution that if I wouldn't have delivered the API, they would just go to another place, okay? I want to count how many users chose my solution and pay me now money because of the new API, because of what we provided. So with the custom sign-up page, so probably some users will say, okay, I prefer to have a custom sign-up page, but if I cannot do it with Wix, okay, not the best, but probably not a blocker, okay? But for custom logic, if I cannot implement my own logic, it's a blocker for me. And you want to understand how many new users you actually have now on your system that came only because you provided this API. This is the actual impact having an API is on your company, on the solution you provide. Another thing you want to do is count unique developers. Okay, you want to understand how many developers are working on your system, unique ones. So maybe you have 2 developers or 5 developers, and maybe they generate you a lot of money, but you need to understand the number. So it doesn't mean that a huge number is a success, but you need to understand how many of them. And what happens when you acquire a developer. And you went to a meetup, and you need to understand where your developers come from, and what is the best way to recruit developers, and how did they hear about your solution. So this is something you need to understand. You need to count how many developers you actually have. Another thing you need to do is you need to measure conversion to active real usage. What do I mean? I mean, some users, like in any other product, will come to your product, to the API product, and try to evaluate it. They run the getting started tutorial. They'll build something, but and you'll see maybe API counts, okay, in your monitors. But at the end, they'll leave because, I don't know, maybe they didn't find the API good enough for them. Maybe the developer experience was not good enough for them. You need to understand how many developers start using your product, start using the API, sign up for the developer program usually, and how many of them at the end has a real active systems working. How many of them, for example, switch from the test account to the live account. Sometimes they use different API key. You need to, it's very tricky to actually understand what's an active, okay? And this is also something we struggle. It's very business specific, but you need to have a real number of how many real usages you have. Because you need to understand why you lose developers, like any other users, why you lose developers in the way. One last thing, which is very clear to product manager usually, but I think it's very important to say also to you, you need to talk to your users. This is like specifically with API, it's not quantitative measurement like you usually have with, with monitors, with numbers, with conversion, but you need to talk to them. You need to talk to our users, to your users, and also to people who are not your users. You don't need to ask your users what features are you looking in, okay? What do you want us to build? You need to ask them, what did you try to build, okay? You need to ask them what they actually want to build with your product. And then you need to understand whether your API fits what they need, okay? You need to speak with the one who are not your users, whether they left you and they are not your users, or you can go to and find with friends, and in Israel, you always someone who knows someone, and talk to people who use your competitors and ask them why did they choose this competitor, and if they heard even about, you need to understand why. And these are things that are usually very clear to product managers, but I think it's very important for you also to probably do this part in your organization. Thank you very much for joining us.